All right, gentlemen, thanks for joining us today. This is a little bit different of a topic from what we normally do for Kinetic Living webinars. We typically will kind of hit a topic that we talk about inside the Kinetic Man Mastermind, but we're going to kind of skirt around a little bit. And David and I both read a book not too long ago called Die with Zero by a guy named Bill Perkins. Has anyone read it? Just raise the hands if anyone's read it. Paul, Stephen, yep. Mike, have you read it?
I'm familiar, but I
Okay.
can't read. So
Can't read. You and David both. David had to listen to it on audio. But yeah, so we both read this book. It was we had been talking a lot about setting up trusts and wills and how to leave a legacy for our children. And then another gentleman that we had on our podcast recommended the book Die with Zero. And so we took a look at it, and you read the cover of it, and you're like, oh man, what's this going to be about? And we dove in, it was very, very impactful to us in a way that we really changed a lot of things in our daily lives because of it. And so we're going to kind of dive into that a bit today. And so, one of the things it talks about, and I'll just get into it here, is I don't know about you guys, but did any of you have some friends or somebody from college or from high school or something like that who just decided out of the blue to go on and take like an epic trip, like after college graduation, and they went to like some far off destination and had some like amazing experience, like backpacking around Europe for like 30 days or something like that? Maybe you guys know somebody, or was that you? Yeah. Um, I do for sure. So like this is, they talk about it, Bill talks about it in the book, but I had this exact experience. I had some buddies after graduation from the Naval Academy. They all decided to go together and do a backpacking trip around Europe for 30 days. And they invited me. They went on a shoestring budget, like with no plan in place, and they just were planning on like living out, their fullest lives for like 30 days. And they invited me, and I chose to stay back. I don't know really why I chose to stay back, but at the time, I just thought that that wasn't the most important thing that I could do with my time after graduation, and so I stayed back. And after their return, a couple of those guys went on to flight school with me, and they would reminisce about that trip like all the time. Like they would just recount these epic stories that the people that they met, the amazing adventures that they went on, and they talked about those like all the time, and like I listened to the conversation, but I obviously wasn't a part of it. Well, those memories for them, like they've lasted a lifetime. And like literally I still hear about some of them when they get together. Like we had our 20-year college reunion not too long ago, last October, and some of those guys were there, and they brought it up. And they will continue to think about that and talk about it for the rest of their life. And I missed out. That one opportunity I missed out on. I'll never have the chance to do it again. And there's a quote in the book, Die with Zero, and it was really impactful to me. And it says, "The business of life is the acquisition of memories. In the end, that's all there is." And so, I think about that, and I think about, that epic 30-day backpacking through Europe experience that they had. And, I will never get a chance to relive that. And now I'm married with kids, and, to do that with a bunch of buddies, probably my wife would not allow that to happen. And so, I'll never have that experience again. Um, there's a metaphor also in the book that he says, here's a metaphor of this exact example. He says, you build a well, you get a pump, and as the pump pumps water into a cup, the cup quickly fills. So the water starts to overflow. And you take a sip and you keep pumping. And at the end of your life, after a lifetime of pumping, you see that you're still thirsty. What a waste. So for David and I, that was a huge wake-up call for us. We knew that we had to start making some changes in our life to start creating these memories, the acquisition of memories. So I can, 40 years down the road, talk about those experiences with my kids, with my friends, with my family, and remember back through those memories that will last, for the rest of my life. So imagine the regret that you would feel if you get to the end of your days and you realize that you haven't managed to live a life, full of those satisfying experiences yourself. So this is what we're going to talk about today. Investing in memory dividends.
Yeah, and Stu, I just want a point of clarification. Did you really get invited on the trip? Like, don't lie.
I did.
Did people really want to spend 30 days backpacking with you through Europe? Because I personally think,
yeah,
I think you're lying. I think you're lying.
No, but he was on my baseball buddies. I played baseball
I'm just
with.
kidding, man. I'm sure they invited you. They didn't know you that well. I'm sure they invited you.
Uh-huh.
No, all joking aside. So if you read a book like that, or you're listening to the stories on this webinar, what does that really mean to you? Right? Like, do you realize that this story is, hey, I'm living this story, and it really doesn't matter. One of the things we really want to highlight here, it doesn't matter where you are in that journey, right? So say you miss the opportunity at 20, say you're in your 20s, which none of you appear to be in your 20s. Not that you don't look like you're in your 20s. I just know from the appearance of maturity that you're all beyond your 20s. But maybe you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. It doesn't really matter. No matter where you are on this journey, there's still opportunity to live to your fullest, right? You can, and I think it's worthwhile that you actually assess it. You ask the question. It's a fair question. It's a fair question to say, okay, have I lived life to my fullest, and am I currently doing so? And that question is a great question, because it also forces you to really dig deep and have some self-awareness and self-analysis, and be like, man, you know what? I don't even know what a full life looks like. I've never defined that for myself. What does that mean? And so that conversation, that process in and of itself is a beautiful conversation. And who knows what you, excuse me, what you come out from that. But what I can tell you is, no matter where you are, it's not too late. And this is not, our intent here. Any of you who have any exposure to us know that the Kinetic Man has a purpose, right? It's a purpose for action. So yeah, we could sit here and tell great stories, and it could be amazing and entertain you guys. That's not the point. The point of this entire conversation is to show you that we chose at some point, which for Stu and I and Steven, that was about 2 years ago, but we made a life choice to change, right? It was just a decision. It was a point in time. We made a decision, and we went from there. And so we're going to tell you what we've done to make that change. And really, it's been awesome, because we started putting a large amount of effort into investing in experiences with our families, with each other, with our tribe of like-minded men. And the amazing thing is, we've come to deeper relationship in all those relationships, right? We've come to deeper relationships with our wives, with our kids, and with our brothers, who, we legitimately hang up some of our mastermind calls and be like, hey, love you guys. And they're all brothers at this point. But again, that comes from, it's nothing that we did that was special. Most of you, if you know Stu or don't, like, it doesn't require a special person. It just requires to do something different and to be better, right? It just requires us to do something different. And so I want to ask you a question. A big part of this is starting with, it starts with creating margin in your life. So just real quick, show of hands, or someone come off mute, just one of you, and tell me, how do you know if you have margin in your life? Just go ahead. Just, don't give me a 20-second thing. Just tell me, how would you know? Quick and easy. How do you know if you have margin in your life?
It sounds like you're saying margarine in your life. I maybe I'm hearing that wrong.
Margin, like capacity, okay. White
Gotcha.
space, any of that. Margarine. I'm more of a butter fan.
I'm a butter guy.
Yeah. I don't do the fake.
We see it in your face. We know.
No judgment if you
well,
do.
Mine.
No, Dave.
Steven, you shouldn't insult our guests. But margin. How do you know if you have margin? Real quick, one sentence. Anybody? All right, I'll tell you, it's easy.
I can't tell.
Yeah, it's super easy. Pull out your calendar. Take a look at your calendar, and that will tell you very, very quickly if you have any margin built into your life. And that's a great way. And that's what we did, right? You're going to hear a lot about calendars. You're going to hear a lot about checkbooks in this talk, but that's what we did. We took a look at our calendar, And we just were trying to understand not only what the power of the calendar had over our lives, but had we done anything to create margin in our lives to have capacity for these the things that we said were important to us. And so we knew we wanted to create community. We knew we wanted to have fellowship. We knew we wanted adventure to be a part of our daily, weekly, monthly plan. We knew all these things, but we also knew, we figured out that if our calendar did not reflect that desire, it would never happen. So let me say that again. If our calendar did not reflect that desire, it would never happen. So we have a friend, Jim Shields. I don't know if you guys, anybody, quick show of hands, anybody heard of the family board meeting? So he wrote a book, and he's dedicated his life to this idea of the family board meeting, of this 18 summers and our time with our family. And he told us on a podcast we did with him that if it's not scheduled, it will never get done. And he was specifically referring to his own date nights with his wife. So he has dedicated his life. He's written a book. He has retreats you can go to in Costa Rica. He's dedicated his life around this idea of spending time with your family, spending time with your wife, your kids, and he's built an entire business around it. And to this day, he admits and he acknowledges that if it's not, the date night is not scheduled on his calendar, it will not happen. So that should really tell you, that should really be reflective of how powerful the calendar is. And it's not something that you're going to be great at. You get to a point in your life where, wow, I don't need it on the calendar anymore, so it's going to happen. It just doesn't happen. And someone like that who's dedicated his life to this, to acknowledge that, I think is a very, very powerful thing. We should all take note of that. And so, Stu, Stephen, and I, we decided to do something about it. We wanted our lives, we wanted our businesses, we wanted the things that we did to reflect our passions, and those passions specifically of purpose, meaningful relationships, and adventure. And so this is what we do, right? We plan adventures. We send lots of invites. We sent, I don't know, Stu, you sent probably 1,000 invites to this, right? Stephen, you probably sent, you said you tapped out your network. You probably sent, I don't know, you probably sent 7 to 10 invites.
Yeah, maybe 15.
Maybe 15, right? So you sent 15 invites to this. So now we're up to like 1,000 or 1,015. I sent however many I sent. But the point is, we're putting ourselves out there, and it doesn't really matter who decides to come right now or doesn't. At some point, when these things become important to you, then you're going to show up, right? And we put these things on the calendar, and then we seek to experience life to the fullest. We spent years trying to define what that looks like, life to the fullest, and now we're doing something about it, putting it on the calendar and experiencing those things. Real quick, there's a book, Man Search for Meaning, you guys have, I'm sure, have heard about it, but Viktor Frankl talks about 3 components to living a life full of meaning. And those are specifically, 1, to be fascinated by a project that is bigger than yourself and demands your attention. For us, we call that purpose. That's purpose to us. The second point is to share in that project and the beauty around it with other people. What does that sound like? It's meaningful relationships. Sharing that beauty is encompassed in meaningful relationships for us. And then his third point was identify and know that there will be challenges along the way. And while it may be painful, it will also enrich your life. What is that very reminiscent of? Adventure, right? Adventure oftentimes can be difficult. There could be pain involved. Climbing a 14er is not particularly devoid of pain. There's pain in that, but there's also joy, and it enriches our lives because we have this adventure and challenge ourselves to do things together in meaningful relationships, which feeds a purpose. And so why do I mention all this? Is it to say that it's simply to say that we started to live our lives full of purpose, relationships, and adventure. And I want to really emphasize this last thing is that it was a decision point. That decision point was followed by an action, and then that action is now a reality. So I'm going to say that again. It was a decision that it started with a decision, and that was followed by an action, which is now a reality. And the best part about it, anybody on this call, anybody who listens to this future podcast, anyone can do the same thing, which is the beautiful thing about it.
Yeah. So, here's just some pictures of some of the stuff that we've done, just recently within the last, year or so. David and I just carved out on our calendar that, we're going to take some epic trips with our family. So, that's me in Mexico with my kids, and that's David in Italy with his kids. These other pictures of groups of men, they're at our retreats. We've done ropes course and zip lines. We've went, shot some archery, just hanging around a table and breaking bread. Goody and I, we go up to the mountains as much and as often as we possibly can to go do adventures. So we're putting these into action. We're putting them on the calendar. We're going and doing it.
And just for a point of clarification, those random women in our pictures, those are our wives as well. It's not just our kids with some like random woman photobombing us.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point, Dave. Thanks. Yeah, that's good. Hey, Stephen, can you go to the next slide? So, to David's point, all of this starts with a decision, right? You're going to identify and decide to start making a change. And you understand that life is not all about just stockpiling money away to save for a rainy day. It's all about making decisions, and you make that with your calendar and your checkbook. You start with those priorities, and then you start carving out time on the calendar for experiences. And maybe it's just once a week. Maybe it's David and I use Thursdays as kind of like our day to go do mountain adventure days. We make fun of it. We call it a mandate. But others that are in our mastermind group and others that are here in Colorado with us, like they know that Thursdays like our mandate day, and Stephen knows like he's not going to get on our calendar on Thursdays because we're going to typically be up going and doing something fun. We created a meetup page, and we're inviting other men here locally in Colorado to go on those mandate days with us. We go hiking, snowboarding, mountain biking, and sometimes we just go grab a coffee or grab a lunch. And you might have to just cancel some meetings or some phone calls or shorten your work hours to go and do that. And you might have to start telling people no that are trying to inundate your calendar, because if you're not managing your own calendar, someone else is going to do it for you. So we had to start learning how to say no. And some of it was important stuff. Some of it was, things for raising money for our real estate investments, or, trying to get, men to join our mastermind group. But, we carve out time on the calendar for that. And we don't, break into that when it's our day to go do adventures. We have to take action, and then you have to invite others to go experience life with you. That's, maybe it's your wife, maybe it's your kids, maybe it's, your best friend from college. Maybe it's from new guys that you met at church. Maybe it's your neighbors, whoever that is, whoever you need to connect with and start doing this stuff with. We really recommend taking an action and going and doing it.
Hey, Stephen, I want to be clear. You are invited to everything Stu and I do. You just need to move to Colorado. So it's not that you're not invited or we don't want you here, but you just need to move here. Sound good? Easy.
Yeah. I'll pass.
Easy day.
Your mom's here. So like,
hey man,
the rest of my family is there. Yes.
That's not a mama
Brother.
joke. Like his mom is literally lives here. And hey, one thing I want to highlight too about the calendar is this is also iterative, right? So we just made a decision within our business, no kidding, probably 2 weeks ago. It was prompted by me saying, hey, I am not fulfilling something that I said is important to me, which is working out. I'm not regularly actively working out, and I would like to do something about that. And so we came together and we're like, okay, cool. Every day, 8 to 10, that's PT time. And this was just 2 weeks ago, right? Because I thought I could squeeze it in the morning, I could squeeze it in the night, but I have all these other priorities on the calendar that are, I have no kidding, snuggle your babies is on the calendar because I want every single night to put my phone down and be very present in bedtime and snuggle my kids. That could be 5 minutes, that could be an hour. I might fall asleep. Whatever that looks like doesn't really matter. It's in the calendar. And so working out was not in the calendar, or it was at a time that was very unrealistic. And so we just changed it, right? And all of us were like, oh man, that's like, I really want to be that consistent with it. And so that's what we did. Stephen, I'm just curious, your Orange Theory, was that during that window? No. Okay. Well, it was during that window. It was during that window for us time.
Yeah. It was during that window for you time, but no, but it was, I am not a morning person, and I had to get up at 5:15 to go do it because I know it's the only time it's going to happen. And so it's something that my wife and I have really you know, my wife has told me repeatedly, like, I just don't know. And like, for context, we have a 3-4 week old baby. So said, like, I don't know when I'm going to do this. Like, I just don't see that as feasible. And I told her, I said, I don't think that that's really a great option. Like, I think you just pick some times on the calendar, and like, we're going to put it on there, and we're going to cancel all the stuff if it's that important, you know?
I love it. I love it. And that's the other thing too. The calendar has to adjust to life consequence or life events, and you had a baby, so the calendar has to adjust. I mean, that's just the natural part of this is not a hard and fast. The calendar has to always be adjust. If you can go to the next slide, Stephen, please. So what are the consequences? I mean, let's be honest, right? Self-awareness is key and it's critical in everything we do. So let's be honest about what the consequences are of not taking action. There's an awesome author, Bronnie Ware. She wrote a book called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And what she did, I don't know if you guys have heard of this book, but she basically tended to patients who'd gone home to die. I mean, that was her job, was to tend to people who were on their deathbed. And she'd normally stay with them between, 3 to 12 weeks. Well, she had a number of very powerful conversations, and she experienced firsthand the emotions that were associated with her patient's knowledge of their nearing death. And she noted that regret was one of the common feelings. And so just take a quick second and take a look at the top 5 regrets of the dying as she defined them based on her conversations in this profession that she had. And just ask, just ask yourself the question, any of these resonate with you? So for those listening, I would just say, hey, these are the top 5. I'll read it real quick. So I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. Wow. And that's pretty powerful, right? And you think about, and that's not just your parents, and how long did the decisions you were making, how long were they impacted by, potential pressure from your parents or perceived pressure from your parents? The second one is, sorry, before I move on from that there's also pressure inherent in your marriage, in raising kids, in all these things. And you just have to ask yourself, okay, am I living my life for me, or am I living the life others expect of me? Very fair question. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. That's the second one. Wish I hadn't worked so hard. The third one, I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. How long are you carrying that? I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. The fourth one, I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. That's a huge one, especially, we got a bunch of men on here, right? And especially amongst men, we fall into this trap of not having any friends. And then the fifth one, I wish I had let myself be happier. And what I love about that is I wish I had let myself be happier. It's very active. The language is active. It's a decision. It's a choice. It's something that we can do and we can control. I listened to Rick Warren a bunch, and what I love about him is he talks about some emotions that are wasted emotions. Guilt is amongst them, and bitterness is another one, and worry, right? These things that whether you can't control the outcome, so you have these emotions that tie with that, which is a wasted emotion, or they're backwards looking. And one of the biggest ones he hits on is regret. And what I love about it is regret is something that you can do something about proactively. You can ask yourself, will I regret not doing XYZ? You can ask yourself that question. And if the answer is yes, now you can make a decision right now based on that. And that's what I love about, I hate about regret, but I love about regret is that you can actually do something about it proactively to avoid some of those feelings. Can you stop working so much right now? 100%. You have the top 5 right in front of you. Is there something you could do about each of those things today? I would argue absolutely yes, you could. And so, this idea of moving back to Tao is Zero, this idea of retiring on memories, it runs completely counter to most of the things we hear about retirement, especially in Western culture, especially in the United States, because we're constantly hearing the message, save for retirement, sock away money into the market in your 401k plan, do an IRA. And you constantly hear about save for a rainy day. Well, what if you live in the desert and it doesn't rain? What are you saving for, right? Like, it's a fair question to say, what is a rainy day? What does that look like? Have I ever defined what a rainy day is? And if you haven't, then it's just worthwhile to start digging into these things. One of Aesop's fables, the ant and the grasshopper, the ant is framed to be the smart one, right? He's sitting pretty after harvesting his grain, and the grasshopper goes out bouncing around, and he's hungry after spending his whole summer playing. And while this is an extreme example, this is the way most people look at things, very black and white on the extremes, right? And our culture tends to overemphasize the virtues of the ant and the hard work and the delayed gratification and the cost at the cost of other virtues, we don't consider that the grasshopper may also have been onto something. I am not an advocate for irresponsible spending. I'm not an advocate for not saving your money. I'm not an advocate for anything that will put you in financial ruin so you can go have fun. We do not advocate for that. We're investors. We're real estate investors. We run a fund and we manage other people's money. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is it's not the extremes that we should be focused on. Is there a middle ground? Is there a lot of fun that we can have in the summer, maximize our potential now, maximize the fun we're having, and the memories we're creating, while also doing something, not giving all that up just to save for a rainy day and save for a time that I'm too frail to enjoy the money that I have put aside. And so it's just something that we started digging very, very deeply into. And we recognize that we need to realize that there can be a bridge between the two and you can make time for both. We just don't.
Stephen, next slide. So this is a screenshot from the book. He's talking about, this idea of investing in experiences and creating memory dividends. And this is a chart that Bill Perkins came up with, a 7-year fulfillment curve in memory dividends. And if you look at it, it's really interesting. You'll see that this idea of an experience, it actually keeps on giving in the form of fulfillment from your memories. And over time, those memories actually increase and increase and increase. And the dividends from that memory continues to grow. So think back at like one of the best vacations that you ever had. And think about how much time you spent showing pictures of that trip afterwards to your friends and to your family. You probably, posted some of your photos on Facebook or on Instagram or Twitter or whatever. Now, like add in all the times that you and the people you travel with reminisce about that trip, and all the times that you thought about it yourself, or you've given advice to somebody to go and do that same vacation, when they're considering, going on a trip. All those residual experiences from the original experience that happened, those are memory dividends. They just continue to add up over time. And some of these memories, they, upon reflecting on it, they actually bring more enjoyment than the original experience to begin with. Like if you think back, like thinking back through it actually gives you more joy than when it was actually happening. It's pretty interesting. So, the most important point to all of this is like, you have to start now. Like you can't, to David's point, you can't just put money away in the 401k, in the IRA, saving for a rainy day. You have to put money into this experience, but it doesn't have to be expensive. Like it doesn't have to be like some grandiose, huge trip to 30 days, in Italy. It can be like super small, hour-long trips, day trips, stuff that doesn't cost a whole lot. We'll talk about some stuff on the next slide that we did this summer that was free. You have to start doing this stuff now, because at the end of your life, when you're 60 or 70 and you've put all that money away, another thing you got to think about is your health. Will you even be able to go on these trips? Like think if you go to Italy, like Goody just went to Italy last summer. Goody, how many stairs did you climb, while you were there in Italy?
1 million.
1 million
stairs. Yeah, 1 million stairs.
Think you could have done that when you were, 70?
Yes, I do.
Really?
No, but all joking aside, we were still having calls while I was over there, and I was like, man, I'm looking around. I had read this book actually on my way to and finished it early in the trip. And I was like, man, it's so true. I'm looking around at all these people that waited for this time in their life to go, older folks, and they were struggling. They were struggling, right? And we were doing fun things like with my kids, I was like, hey, let's find the highest tower or St. Peter's Basilica or whatever the highest point is in this city that we can climb, and let's go climb it and look at the city from there, right? And whether it was Rome or a bunch of the Tuscan towns. And I'll tell you that the age, as you started climbing those stairs, the age at the top of it started going down significantly, right? It wasn't there. Those folks were not doing those same adventures.
Yeah. Same for me. We did just a Colorado road trip this summer with the kids. We did 6 days and we went to see all 4 state parks, or I'm sorry, national parks in Colorado. And like one of them was the Great Sand Dunes National Park. And you literally have to like hike up the side of these huge sand dunes just to be able to then slide down them. Like there's no way I would have been able to do that at age 80, or 70, when I'm retired, to the same level that I can do now with my kids.
Or take the face plant. You won't be able to handle the face plant that you took on the sand snowboard that you
I did.
that
I
you
did
experienced.
I did take a pretty serious face plant.
You're not getting up as easily at that point.
That's right. That's right. Stephen, next slide.
Hey, so one of the things we want to do, and these pictures are just a reflection of that, is we know that this works, right? This is not this is not a nice to have. This is not something that we are preaching but don't know. And it's not just us, right? It's not just us. It's men in the mastermind are doing things that they never thought they'd do, and they're epic. And I'll tell you kind of what it boils down to. So, this year, and I would say this is the first summer that is a culmination of a couple of years of really, really diving deep into this. And we started really, really investing in our own memory dividends. And so, as Stu mentioned, I took a month-long trip to Italy. And I just want to highlight a couple of things. One of the things that prompted us to want to have this conversation is Eric and I dug into the cost of it, right? And when someone hears, I mean, just imagine your own reaction to this. So when someone hears, I took 28 days, I went to England, and then I went throughout Italy, hotels, flights for 5, and we ate. We had to buy a bunch of food, and I did not budget in every single night my kids had gelato. I did not budget that, but even that was about $300 for 3 kids for the entire time, right? And so what's interesting, dude, it's a lot of gelato. I don't even like ice cream, man. So I didn't get to imbibe in that, or I could have. I chose not to. But lest you feel sorry for me, there was plenty of other things that I added about 10 pounds on as I was imbibing. But the point is, that trip cost vastly less than I think most people would think. And I was actually surprised when we came back. And did we have to save for it? 100%. Yes, we did. And it was not a trivial amount of money, but the point is it is very doable. It is a very doable thing. And until you start running the numbers, you just don't know that. Until you start considering if you have 30 days to do that, you just don't know if you really do. And so it was an amazing experience. And to Stu's point, a lot of times we'll go back. And what I do love about social media, I'm not a huge fan, but what I do love is that we can go back and look at all the pictures that Erica posted for our family so they could track the trip. We go back and look at those, and it was amazing. And the kids got to experience things that they've never been able to experience, and we just made it happen. Stu, as he mentioned, went to Mexico, took his family there. They did that 6-day trip around Colorado. I mean, these are all things that required planning. And at some point, you run the numbers and you're like, yeah, we can do this. Let's do it. And then you just pull the trigger and do it, because there's a lot of analysis that went in, especially for Stu, right? I'm much less analytical, but Stu analyzed this thing and probably still is, and does it and projects forward on how many of these that he can do. There are some things that cost nothing. The gas money. It cost Met gas money to go to do 2 14ers, went on multiple epic hikes, amazing hikes out here in Colorado that we just hadn't done before. Mountain bike trips, fishing trips, snowboarding trips, the rope course, a zip line, and many other adventures with the Kinetic Men. But these are not things that are breaking the bank. They're not things. Really, what it boils down to, the biggest challenge is time. It's time. And when you really decide that you want to do it, the time magically appears, because you stop doing things like, I don't know, whatever you do, binge watching Netflix, or no judgment on any of these things, but we do have a lot of time that we waste, and you just have to acknowledge the time, where your time goes. And again, so some of you might think, hey, I can't afford a trip like that, or I don't have the time in my schedule for something like that. I would absolutely challenge you on that. And I think, if you're absolutely honest with yourself, have you taken the steps to assess and even analyze if something like this is possible for you? And what I mean by that is, let's just go through a quick list of very practical steps. Have you seriously discussed your desires with your partner? Have you asked her what her dreams are for travel? Have you done that? that in and of itself, again, is a very rich conversation. Have you taken any time to consider what your travel dreams and desires are? Again, time well spent. Have you run the numbers? Have you looked at your vacation time? Have you talked to the boss that you potentially need to chat about time off with? Have you put the trip in your calendar? If you haven't done any of these things, then honesty with yourself is the best policy, right? So if you have not had these conversations or you've not dug into it, then you honestly can't say you can't take the trip. And just as much, you truly cannot say you can't take the trip, just as much as you can say you can't, that you can't say you can, right? Like you can't say either way, because there's honestly no data to support whatever it is you're deciding if you've not done the research, if you've not run the numbers, if you've not done these things or had these conversations. Then if you're truly honest with yourself, you cannot say you can or cannot do it until you run those numbers, right? Until you go through those conversations. And I will also tell you a side benefit to these conversations is that there's very productive and unintended discussions. So let me just throw this out at you. My wife and I were discussing, the Italy trip. We started about 2 years ago, started talking about how we're going to make it happen. Well, we also came to the realization, which seems so basic, but when you say it out loud and when you sit in it with your wife, it has a much deeper impact. But we have about 19 years with our kids. 19 years with our kids. 18 of those are in the first 18 years of their life. The 19th year is the rest of your life. Think about that. When they go away, that concentrated, significant time also goes away. And you may be lucky if you're getting 365 days potentially for the rest of your life, unless you're very, very intentional about creating the environment where that happens. But even if you do an epic, 2 weeks, 1 month, a year with your kids, I mean, just do the math for yourself. The first 18 years of their life is the vast majority of the time you're going to get with your kids. And then you got very limited time after that. So my wife and I were like, wow, what are we going to do about that? And so we set a 12-year plan in place to say, okay, I mean, this is what it looks like for us. We decided that for the next 12 years, we're going to do an international trip followed by a domestic trip, international, domestic. And that's what it's going to look like for the next 12 summers for us. And after that, the kids are gone. And we're just going to be gone overseas, whatever we're going to do. I don't know what we're going to do, but it's a very intentional plan that we set in motion because of conversations like this. And you don't know what the result of this conversation will be. So I would just encourage you to go down this path and just see what happens. You get to know your wife better, your kids, yourself, and who knows what the result is. And I'll also tell you, once you get the planning ball rolling, the excitement makes it hard to stop. It's like doing your taxes. Once you start, you probably get them done, but it takes forever to start. At least if you're me, right? It takes forever to start. But once you get going with something, it's like most things. The ball just gets rolling, and as you get excited about it and you have these conversations, you're like, oh, let's make this happen. Right. Like I'm already getting extremely excited. My wife and I are having conversations about our domestic trip coming up next summer. Like we're already planning it, right? Where are we going to get the RV? How much is that going to cost? I already have a budget in my mind of the RV is going to be about $5,000 for a month. Can we do that? How we can do that? I'm starting setting money aside now, and it's going to be awesome. We're already looking at booking the sites in the national parks and where we want to go. And so this thing just takes off. It has a life of its own. It's very exciting. It's very empowering. It's very life-giving. And I want to leave you with this thought, because each of you can do it, right? And so you just have to make it a priority. And I was recently told this, and I had a conversation just yesterday with one of the members of our mastermind. And that's, if you truly want to do it, you'll find the money. It just is the nature of how we do things. I asked the guy yesterday, hey, dude, I should take you to go get a mountain bike so you can go mountain biking with us. He's like, oh, it's not in the budget. And I challenged him immediately. I'm like, is it not in the budget? Or do you not want to do it? Could you make this purchase tomorrow if you wanted to? And he was like, yes. I'm like, okay, don't blame the budget. Blame the fact that it's not a priority for you. And that's fine. It's cool if it's not a priority. But if you want to make it happen, I strongly believe that you can make it happen. And it doesn't have to be a crazy trip. It just has to be something, and you can make it happen. And so again, as Stu said, they don't have to be extravagant. They don't have to be long-lived. it can be something one of our buddies calls them micro adventures. You can just have a free time, a couple hours, you go out and you do a thing. One of the things Stu introduced me to, creaking. There's a picture of it. That's the bottom picture. I think it's a long. I look pretty skinny in that picture. That there's some kind of filter that's been applied to that.
We had to kind of squeeze it together to make it fit.
There's
definitely makes you look skinnier than you really are.
Yeah, there's a filter on that. And actually it's weird because it makes Stu look dumber, which I'd never thought there'd be a filter that can make him look dumber. But my point is, we literally met up, took our kids out into a creek, and we just played in the water and caught crawdads and laughed, and it was amazing. Didn't cost anything. My kids are still talking about it. And so I'll tell you, and imagine this for yourself. I can't tell you how many times I've heard my kids say, Dad, remember when we did blank? Dad, remember when we did blank? Create that environment, create those memories, create those opportunities, and it'll absolutely be life-changing for you.
Let me add, I don't know if you guys listened to our podcast, but we had a podcast this week. And he is creating a business for military veterans to help with cognitive behavior therapy, people with mental health challenges. And he started it because one of his sailors committed suicide. And in his story, you guys can go listen to it. It's Monday's episode. In this story, he says that when he went to go talk to his dad kept on reminiscing about his son telling him that their command went and climbed some mountain in the Yosemite. And he kept on telling our friend that he's talking to about that he should have done that with his kid. He said, I should have done more of this. I should have done more of this. And he had major regret as a dad not going and doing these type of adventures with his son. And that kills me. Like I almost started crying when he told us that on the episode. If you don't know me, I tend to cry easily, but it just had a major impact on me. And I don't ever want my son to someday say, Dad, I wish you'd have, done more with me, or vice versa. I wish I'd have done more with my son. It was pretty impactful to me. So go take a listen to it if you haven't listened to it yet. All right, last slide here, Stephen, if you can switch slides here. All right, so first, we really want to thank you guys for showing up today and coming along this journey on this webinar with us. I know you guys had lots of other things going on, but we appreciate you joining us. As you can probably see, David and I are really passionate about this. Stephen as well. So based on this conversation, here's some things that you can do. First and foremost, go start investing into your own life experiences. Start creating memory dividends for yourself. Like we said before, it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be extravagant. Just start going and doing things, putting priority, making a priority on the calendar. It doesn't have to be, a lot. Start small, go creaking. I promise you, it is a ton of fun. Second, you need to surround yourself with other people that are doing it. Find a tribe, find a group of people. It could be online, it could be at a church, it could be. I went to the gym this morning too, and it was 5:30, and there was a group of like 40-year-old dudes in the gym playing basketball together. It could be a group of guys playing basketball together at 5:30 in the gym. Find a tribe and get involved. Practice this with other men. If you live in Colorado, which none of you on this call do, but for those listening to this in the future, we're trying to do this every week. We created a Meetup page. You can find it on meetup.com, or you can just go to our website and there's a banner at the very top of the page, and you click on it and it'll take you. And we try to post something, almost every Thursday to go do something fun. We're going and grabbing coffee together. We're going climbing 14ers. We're going snowboarding, all the things that we've kind of talked about in the past. We have a podcast called the Kinetic Man Podcast. I referenced that, this episode that came out this week on Monday. This recording will come out pretty soon as well. And we love to have conversations like this on our podcast. We have amazing guests that come on and talk through, you know, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about in the mastermind. If you want to come to Colorado, we're doing a retreat. We do a 3-day, 2-night retreats a year, just for, you know, men inside the group, but it's also open to men that are outside the group. This next one's coming up soon. It's in at the end of September. We found an amazing 200-acre ranch in Empire, Colorado, that's run by a nonprofit organization. They do summer camps for kids with autism in the summertime. And then when they're not in camp, they open it up for others to come and use it. And so we're going to do that. It's just a great experience where men come together in fellowship. We break bread. We do something hard. We typically go on a long, hard hike. We typically do something fun where we call it the Kinetic Man Olympics. We break into 2-man teams and we go play fun games like, you know, cornhole and can jam and Jenga. What other games do we play, Steven?
Spike ball.
Spike ball. Yeah, that's always it's a hot one. So we just have fun and we compete, and then we have a guest speaker that comes in who does an amazing job. He's also been on our podcast, and it's Brendan Jones. And then, you know, there's lots of just amazing side conversations that happen. You know, we call them the in-betweens. You know, we schedule time in between kind of the events, and you get to talk to, you know, other like-minded men that are doing amazing things in business, in life, being a better dad, being a better husband, being a better friend. I'm always on the lookout for a new best friend. So if you come, you know, we'll have an application at the door, you know, for you to, you know, come be my best friend.
You don't want to fill it out. It's it's actually will take life from you. Trust me. It's a trap. Terrible. It's a terrible role.
Yeah. And the last thing, you know, we talked a lot about this mastermind, the Kinetic Man Mastermind. We meet on Zoom every single week in small groups, you know, similar to kind of like a church small group, 10 to 15 men, and we get real. You know, we get honest, we get vulnerable, and we talk about, you know, this type of stuff. We talk about the challenges in our life. We open up to other men. There's laughter, there's tears, there's everything in between. And we then go take action. We, you know, make this stuff like really important in our lives. We actually take action on the things that we say are a priority. And we do it together in a community. I think a lot of us need community right now. We need a tribe. We need men to do this with. We need friends. So all this can be found on thekineticman.com. You know, we love, you know, for you guys on this call to consider it. But, you know, again, most important thing, go start doing this stuff. Goody, what are we doing this Thursday?
This Thursday?
Yeah.
We are most likely going down to Canyon City, which is awesome.
It is awesome.
Is anybody, Alex, where are you at? Sorry.
I'm in the Springs.
Oh, dang.
Sweet.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Well, Thursday, let's talk after, but let's grab coffee. Let's do something dope.
Cool.
Get together. We'll talk about Steven, which is amazing. And then you and I'll connect. And then we can talk about Steven and Stu, and it'll be amazing.
Dude, I've got so many good stories about Steven.
I can't wait. I can't wait.
Nice.
I can't wait to do it.
Nice.
Mike, you coming out to Colorado? Just want to come out and hang out for a couple days?
I got a mother-in-law that lives out there, so I get out there every couple of years or so.
Giddy up. Then Paul, we already talked. Can't wait to see you. That's awesome, gents. Thank you guys. You guys have any questions before we sign off? Oh, so go ahead, Stu.
No, I was just gonna say the exact same thing. You guys have any thoughts, comments, questions before we get to the top of the hour?
A running list of dividend building family activities that other mastermind people have thought of. So like your lead magnet is people come to your list of ideas that other guys have thought of before. TripAdvisor for dumb dudes.
It's interesting you say that. We do have that thread going. We have an internal discussion forum, and we do have that thread of, you know, ideas, things to go do just with your spouse, like on a date day with your spouse. Then we have another thread to do fun things with your friends, and then another one, fun things to do with your kids. So yeah, it's good.
I was also going to say, if y'all want to, like, if this topic sort of piqued your interest or you want to dive into it more, there's a couple of resources that I've found really impactful that have changed the way that I think on sort of a daily basis. One of those is Wait But Why. If you Google Wait But Why and life in weeks, those visual charts are sobering, to say the least. Right. And it kind of pairs with if you're familiar with the family board meeting, I always call it 18 Summers book. That's it's a really great visual reminder of like taking action on this stuff now. And then the other one is it's a thread that was on Twitter by an account called Punk659 that had he did the math on like your friends, and it's the same idea as the 18 Summers, like your friends, you know, when a friend comes in town and you say, maybe next time, like I'll catch you for dinner. I say yes now. That's my automatic answer is yes. And it's because you know, Al, you and I are like a great example, right? We're good friends. We spent 4 years in college. If you do like rough math, 10 months a year, 25 days a month, right? You're at like 1,000 days or so. And if you and I saw each other one time a year for the next 40 years, that means we've got 40 days left out of 1,000 we've already spent, right? So those are just a couple of things that I found as really powerful resources to sort of like mold this topic into actionable items is in terms of like changing your mindset.
Were you gonna say something, Alex?
No, I was gonna say thanks for the invite, Steve. I thought this was awesome. A couple of things that came to mind as you were talking about memory dividends is just thinking back on my childhood. And so my dad passed when I was 14, and I remember thinking like through every major event in high school, right, of all the things that he wasn't present for. But then also looking back at all the memories and things that I've been able to do in my lifetime and how that relates to my kids. Now I've got an 8-year-old and 4-year-old. And to me, I think there's so much value in just giving them different life experiences. You know, and if you think about the concept of those memory dividends for us, I mean, imagine when you start that in your kids, and how much of their personalities, their behavior, you know, the way they view the world is based off of those memories and those lessons that you give to them, because it has nothing to do with, you know, the actual event, but it has everything to do with those little snippets of time in those events that they build their persona, their character, all that from. So super impactful. Love it.
I love that, man. You know, it's interesting. One of my favorite things about what we do at the Kinetic Man is to your point, it just is an awareness that there's a different level of intentionality that we could live in, and the impact that has not only through our kids observing us modeling behaviors, which is huge, right? Huge. But it's also recognizing how much power we have to do exactly what you said, right? It doesn't have to be extravagant. It can just be like, you know, the idea of dates with the kids. A lot of guys in the group had not really necessarily considered that. And so then they started dating their kids, and the dates become more creative, and you find opportunities to spend one-on-one time, and that's time with daddy. And it's very, very unique. It's special. And so like my 6-year-old, we joke in my house, my 6-year-old is benefiting from like, I have a 12, a 10, and a 6. My 6-year-old benefiting from all the intentionality that is now becoming just a normal part of life. And my 12-year-old, you know, it's almost like I'm like, oh man, this is lost time. Like I gotta really like, you know, make sure she knows how special she is, and what I have to do. Like I'm accounting for those things. Whereas most of us just live life like, hey, activity, soccer game, this, that, and we just, not bad and not judgy. It's just, we get lost in it. We just get lost in the mix. And it really requires us to step back and be like, okay, like, Mike, what you said, is there a list I can reference? And then I just start checking them off. Even if it's that aviator like checklist, how much better is that than not? Right. And that's the thing. Like, some people say, it's so rigid. Okay, awesome. You take your non-rigid style. How many dividends are you creating in your non-rigid style? You're not, because everything's reactionary. But in a more rigid environment that we create, and when I say rigid, that's a great thing. A more intentional environment, you can literally go down and you're like, bam, 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 and you're doing these things with regularity, and then it just, because those things are all in there. And the generational impact of that, now you created a tradition that your grandkids and your grandkids could potentially benefit, because you started something like that, right? Just whatever, creaking. What if in 100 years, our great grandkids are creaking because we started creaking? Like, it's the dumbest thing, but it's awesome. It's awesome. So I love it, man. I love that you highlight that, because we have a lot of power as dads and as men in our households to do these types of things, and we should never relegate that. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times my son, he's a similar age, Alex, to your kids. I have an 8-year-old daughter and a 5-year-old son. And, this morning in the car, as we're sitting in car line to drop off, like, my son was like, "Hey, Dad, remember when we blah, blah, blah," and they're like the smallest, minuscule little things. Like, "Hey, Dad, remember when we were walking the creek and I found the head of a crawdad in its shell and I acted like I was gonna like eat it?" Ha 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 ha. Right? Like that's the memory that he has in his head from going and doing that. And to David's point, like, if you're not intentional with this stuff, like, it'll never happen. So
Yeah, well, it's funny. My birthday was yesterday. Tradition in our family, we make cards. We make all our cards for whoever's birthday it is. And the reference to being a kinetic man from all the kids, I was kind of blown away by it. I was like, because it's more than a business, right? Like, to them, it's not, it's not it's a culture versus like, hey, daddy does this thing. And so it's that intentionality. It's because we tie the Kinetic Man, that title, to these activities. And so in their head, they're like, "Oh, I love the Kinetic Man," because it means daddy's, being dumb and turning the music on, and we're doing dance day on Thursday or whatever that looks like. So anyway, it's good stuff, man. Appreciate you guys showing up. It's 11:01. Don't want to take your time. You guys are awesome.
yeah, guys, thanks for showing up today. We'll end the recording
Thanks
here.
for inviting us.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Yeah.